Welcome everybody to the seasonal diet, eating what our ancestors ate when they ate it, like we were evolved to do. Very special recipe for you guys today. It is a traditional Norwegian dish, but given a little Native American swing to it, but it would have been something that Europeans long ago would have had access to as well. So we are making the traditional Scandinavian kjøttkaker. But instead of the traditional kjøttdeig or karbonadedeig, we are going to be using bison deig. So it would be ground bison. Now, bison, this is an animal that is not native to Scandinavia at all, but it was native to Europe for many, many thousands of years. We had a breed of European bison as well, and they were actually still roaming wild up until about 100 or 200 years ago. So this is definitely something our ancestors would have had access to for quite a long time. And the breed, and especially the nutrition in the meat, is very, very similar to the American bison. So that's what we are having today. And we're going to be making this almost the same as the traditional Norwegian kjøttkaker, but there's going to be a few key differences that are going to make it better. Some things with a little historical background and some just tips from my grandmother. So first, in goes the meat. We have got to mix that all together. Now what we're going to put in that is a little bit of salt and pepper. If you guys remember, I have spoken about salt and pepper before. Of course, they had salt and pepper in ancient times in Europe, but this was really a delicacy, so I don't use a whole lot of it. It wasn't until pretty recent times in history that we have been able to just import bags and bags of salt for very cheap from the east. Same thing with pepper, so I don't use a whole lot of that. Just a little bit of garlic powder. It's not called for in the recipe usually, but it is native to the north of Europe and has grown there and been used in cooking for a very, very long time. Now, a lot of people will leave it just like that, but like I said, my family, my grandmother, had some special recipes for this. First, we have an egg, just one, and then just a tiny bit of flour. Then it's time to just mix it up as well as we can. And that's about it. Once that's mixed up nice, you just roll them into the little bowls. So once the meat cakes are all rolled up into the little patties like you see here, we are going to peel the potatoes, cut up the potatoes. Those are going in. This is traditional. Like I said, the potatoes are actually less European than the bison meat cakes are, because the potatoes were imported to Europe just 400 or 500 years ago at the most. But it is traditional Norwegian this time, but just beware of before, about 400 or 500 years ago, they would have used turnips instead, or maybe even parsnips. But we're using potatoes, keeping it according to the well-known tradition at least, so we're doing that. Next, very, very important, you can't have the meat cakes without the brun saus, the brown gravy, and I'm going to show you how. This is just a standard brun saus recipe, but there are a lot of different ways to do this. Very simple. First, you put just a little bit of butter in there. You can do 2-3 teaspoons depending on how much gravy you're trying to make. I'm making about maybe a quarter of a liter, half a liter, something like that, and I just eyeball these things. It's not that big of a deal. Then, while that's waiting, that is the butter is supposed to brown. So while that's warming up, we are putting the meat cakes in the pan. This is important to do at the same time because you're going to need the juices from the meat cakes, as I will show you in a minute. So the meat cakes can start to fry right away. Next, we can chop up a little bit of onions too while we're waiting. That's also going to go in with the meat cakes as we get further along in the cooking process. But after the butter has started to brown, we are putting in the flour. This is, again, you need just a couple teaspoons of this, about the same amount as the butter you have been using. So that goes in all together, and you have to stir this pretty good, and it's going to get pretty, chunky. It's going to get very chunky, actually. It's almost going to look like you're making cookies or little breads or something. So you stir that up really good as you can. And eventually, when it's all brown and nice, after a few minutes, you put in the beef stock. So you can use anything you want. You can use beef stock, chicken stock, whatever you want. I'm just saying beef stock works best because we're using red meat, bison beef for the meat cakes. Then we can get back to the meat cakes, and by the way, that flour, we're supposed to stir that very, very rapidly as well. We're not allowed to basically take our eyes off it for too long. We have to keep a constant movement in that. But going back to the meat cakes, we can flip them, and now we can put in the onions. Again, this is tradition. Can't have the kjøttkaker without the relic, so we chopped up onions in there, and that's going to fry up all together and be beautiful and nice. And again, onions, very much native, or at least have been grown in the north of Europe for a very, very long time, and they're in season right about now, and they have a long shelf life. Even if they were harvested a couple months ago, they would still be good for our ancestors at this type of year. When they start to fry up a little bit more, the last ingredient, and everybody's grandmother is going to do this, you can't have a proper, basic brun saus in Scandinavia without a little bit of the fat from the meat when it's frying up. So we're putting in a little bit of that fat, and then we're going to keep stirring the gravy right there. And like I always like to do, guys, take a test. I eyeball things. I don't use specific ingredients. That's just not what I do. I'm too much of a peasant for that. But you can test these things mid-cooking and see if there's anything needed to add. Everything's tasted good for me, so I'm about done, about ready to eat. We're taking it out. Finishing it off, we have to stir the sauce really good. Like I said, it might be chunky, but you really have to stir it good. But once that's done, you can put it all on a plate. Then you can finally top it off with the brun saus, with the gravy, and enjoy. This is delicious, and this is actually the first time I've made it, so I was just as excited as you guys are watching. I've had the kjøttkaker millions of times in my life, but these were really good. It definitely tastes a little bit more gamey and lean using the bison meat. So hope you enjoyed that recipe. I know my little friend here at the table did as well, but that's all for today. Let me know, do you guys have any special recipes of kjøttkaker? Do you have any other meats you like to make it out of? Any similar recipes from around the world? Let us all know down below.